My name is Todd Foucher. This is my buddy Chad Cloft. We've been fishing together for 12 years. I've been fishing Tampa Bay. A little bit of a background on me. I've been fishing Tampa Bay for 31 years. I think he's been 30 years. So we have a combined expertise, I guess you would call it. I was a full-time guide for 6 years, from 2004 through 2010. I actually stopped guiding because I lost my love of being on the water. And people ask me, are you sure that's what it was about? And it was. I miss my clients. I still have clients call me to this day and ask, hey, I see your photos and videos on Facebook. Are you guiding again? And I'm like, no. I actually let my license lapse because I knew that I was not going to get into it again. It was something that I wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I actually wanted to have my own TV fishing show at one point. I was able to do that and have it on the Sportsman channel when they launched. I was on Bright House Networks for about a year and a half, and it got way too expensive to do that. And so I ended that and ended my guiding career. So now I'm a weekend warrior again. But just the advantage of having 31 years of fishing Tampa Bay behind my belt, so it's easier for me to go out on a weekend and go and actively target fish. One of the things that we both have become well known for, especially on our YouTube channel, is the grouper and snapper inside of Tampa Bay. A lot of people, I guess, did not realize that this fishery was what it was or what it is. When I was guiding, I actually was fishing for grouper for the last 3 years of my business. And I wasn't bottom fishing. I was actually free-lining pinfish in about 12 foot of water. And my biggest gag in the boat was 36 inches, 26 pounds, in 12 feet of water. Our videos, I guess what happened was we lapsed a little bit for about a year on the YouTube channel. And I stopped videotaping, and I just wanted to concentrate on fishing and having a good time. And the actual YouTube channel was started to kind of help cross-promote for my other business, which is Roundabout Watercrafts. But now it's kind of turning into its own animal. And we have, the subscribership is growing tremendously. And what happened was when we started back up again, we started videotaping the grouper and snapper episodes that we do. And primarily that's all we fish for now. People want to see something different and want to learn something different within this fishery. Tampa Bay is probably the best fishery anywhere. The Keys is good, North Florida is good, but the variety of fish that you can go out and catch within Tampa Bay is unbelievable, as probably most of you know. How we started grouper fishing was we actually had an older boat and we didn't have the GPS trolling motor, so we started primarily fishing the Port Manatee Channel, where I used to fish for grouper when I was guiding. And we did that for a while, and we enjoyed it. We caught some big snapper. So then we bought the new boat. Actually, Sunray Marine is who we bought our boat from a couple of years ago, a Sea Pro 248. And we got a GPS spot lock trolling motor. And that changed the game completely. Completely. So now I told Chad every time, I said, look, the middle of the channel, the main shipping channel within Tampa Bay, has so much stuff in the middle of the channel that it's practically unfished. The guys troll it, that's one thing, but to bottom fish it, and let me emphasize this, you are allowed to stay within the channel if you're not anchored. What we found within the middle of the shipping channel, and on the edges have a lot of areas, and there's a lot of areas that are very prominent within Tampa Bay that a lot of people can find and fish, and it holds a lot of fish.
I think part of it though too is we started fishing the edges. The edges are loaded with fish. The problem is the odds of getting that fish out with that rod is not very likely. Okay? So when we started using the light tackle fishing the edges, there was a lot of cussing, not a lot of video going on. So then we started driving away from that spot and noticed how many fish were stacked up in the middle. Well, in the middle, you're pulling them straight up and down. It seems a little easier in the center of the channel than on the edges to get the fish away.
Now, when he shows this rod, this is the exact rod that I use. This is just a medium heavy, 7 foot medium heavy action rod with a 5,000 reel on it. I have 8-pound braided line and 20-pound leader. And people are like, that's nuts. Well, Yes, it is a little nuts, but what happened was last year, in this time of year when you can't keep grouper, Chad was like, I'm going to start using my inshore rod. And I said, you're crazy. I mean, we were using conventional rods, but we were still using 20-pound fluoro on those conventional rods. But he started using his inshore rod, and he started pulling up 32, 31, 30, 28, 29-inch grouper. And I'm watching him and I'm going, that looks a little bit more fun than what I'm doing. I'll say this, yes, we lose fish. We get broken off, but I have done it over and over again where I put on 40-pound leader, fluorocarbon leader, and he still is using 20. And he will get 10 to 15 bites compared to my one. Yeah, 8-pound braided line is usually about 20-pound breaking strength. Most of the time, we're using about a 6 to 7 foot leader. And so when we get broken off, it's on the leader and not on the braided. We're catching a lot more fish. During this year, we've had more 100-fish days than I can count. And it's like we don't even think about it until after the fact, and we're like, oh my God, we just caught all of these fish. And when grouper season was in season, we were catching our limit practically almost every other time that we went out. But we always were coming back with keeper grouper. One thing that we found too is we were continuously using a knocker rig with 3-ounce and a 2-aught to 4-aught hook. And Chad started using Jig Heads. And that kind of changed the game too, because these fish would react differently. So we started using Jig Heads more and more and more, and we were going through hundreds of Jig Heads every couple weeks. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to start building Jig Heads because we're going through so many Jig Heads. Well,
some of it I think is how the bait reacts on the bottom.
Yeah, because in video that we have, we show where the bait is actually still swimming with a 1-ounce Jig Head. Is swimming like this, just about this far off the bottom. With the knocker rig, he's right on the bottom, and him and I are one right after the other, just one right after the other. And they're looking at us going, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why are you guys catching fish? I'm sitting in the same spot, I'm dropping in the same area. Why am I not catching fish? Well, the problem was when they dropped it down on a knocker rig, that weight will hit the bottom first, and that pinfish or that big whitebait is going to swim away from that weight. So when that weight hits the bottom, that fish is about 15 feet up in the water column. Sometimes even more. With a big pinfish, I literally have to reel up, come tight with the fish, and then drop it back down. I've had to do it 6 times in 40 feet of water. And as soon as I get that bait to the bottom, they eat them. And as soon as those people learn that technique with the knocker rig, it's like this.
Do you find it on that knocker rig, do you do better with snapper? Because they tend to be a little bit higher in the column. Is that not true? Or
it's true.
It's true. It depends on the tide. And that's something that's important. It's completely different inside of Tampa Bay fishing for grouper and snapper than it is going offshore.
Okay.
Offshore, you don't get the strong tides like you do inside Tampa Bay. And that is a key thing that we always have watched and learned as we've done this. And we'll get into this. When we send down the camera, when the tide is ripping, what happens is those fish will hug the bottom and they'll stay right there. And all they're trying to do is stay in one spot. And we've chummed them up to the surface in 45 feet of water on a dead slack tide. And that's our favorite time to fish, is a dead slack tide, because we'll free line. No weight, just like you would do for yellowtail. Is literally just let line out, and just watch the line until it moves or starts to take off. But we've had snapper like this up on top of the water, eating free line baits that we were throwing out, just chummers. The port when the tide is ripping is not as bad as when you're out in the main channel. It slows down some. It depends on what direction the tide's going. If it's going out, it's slower.
It's like more manageable.
Yes, so you can fish on a really hard tide up there. And you can still even chum. You can actively chum the fish up on a hard tide closer to the port that you get. And when I'm looking for areas and I'm going to some of the spots that we already have marked, I don't look for fish. And the reason why is because they're right on the bottom and it's mixed in with, there's most of the stuff in the middle of the channel. If you see a rock that's about this high, that's big.
Now once we start chumming,
then they come up.
Can you see them rise up?
We start free lining.
the free lining, not the jig.
We
Right.
cut the lead off or grab the other rod. And 20-pound test or the 30-pound test leader that you're using. I was having trouble feeling the hit. And by the time I felt the fish swim away, they were already in the rock. So when I go to this rig, I can feel everything.
I'm going to share something that a lot of people don't know. How many people have caught spade fish in their cast nets and thrown them back in the water? Don't throw them back.
I don't know what it is with the spade fish and the grouper. When
They
hit
hate
that
'em.
spade fish, it will knock you out of your tennis shoes.
And it's usually a keeper gag and bigger. 24 inches or bigger. For some reason, they love the spade fish. He kept them one day and I kind of laughed at him and I said, this is a joke. I said, they're not going to eat that. He sent the first one down and got railed, and I looked at him and I said, oh boy. Moharas. If anybody catches moharas, they love those too. Absolutely just love moharas. Pinfish, of course, everybody knows pinfish are really good for grouper. Whitebait is good, but one thing that we try to do is we try to carry as many different baits as possible. So if I know that I can actively go somewhere and catch spade fish, I'm going to go get those. If I know that I can actively go and catch pigfish, pinfish, and whitebait, which typically this time of year, you can catch all three of those at the Skyway.
I've never caught a spade fish.
Okay. It's
Like
In the net?
Oh, it has to be in that? Is that
Well,
No, you
we used to catch them at the Gandy all the time.
sabiki
We would catch them on shrimp.
Yeah.
Fishing as a
Yeah.
bycatch.
Okay.
but there are markers that you can catch them consistently at, and the way you mark them, they're up. And the funny thing is they almost look like threadfin herring on the sonar, but they're a little bit more spread out.
So
Yes.
the question was, can you catch them on a sabiki?
Yes, I try to have as many different baits on the boat as possible, because one day they could be keyed in on pinfish and they'll only eat pinfish. One day that we're out there, they'll eat every bait that we send down. It just depends on what they're in the mood for. Now, on our break-offs, we've noticed that if you break off multiple times, it's going to shut the bite down. I mean, that's pretty much like it is offshore. There's not much you can do with it because a lot of the areas that we fish are smaller than our boat. Some of the areas that we fish are about 100 yards to 150 yards long. So we have different areas where we have one particular area that we actually can go and almost guarantee to catch red snapper inside the bay. We don't catch a lot of them because I think what happens is we'll catch one or two right off the bat, and then the grouper and the big mangoes start to come in. This particular spot that we fish, I have a love-hate relationship with it because it's so small, but I finally learned how to get set up on it right between the waypoints that I have on it, that when we go to this spot, we literally talk about, do we want to send down the small stuff or do we want to send down the big stuff? Because every time we go there, we get broken off multiple times on big fish. And we've caught big mangroves out there. We've caught mangoes on that spot to 22 inches. And it's just a spot that's very difficult to get set up on. And like I said, but it's consistent with red snapper, right? When they opened up red snapper for those couple of weekends, we went out there. On Saturday, we caught what, one or two? Two. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to go back on Sunday. And I took my wife out there and I caught another one. And then I got broke off a couple of times, and then it shut the bite down at that particular spot. But now we have 3 spots that we've caught red snapper out of. And it's not a consistent thing, but this one particular spot that is consistent. Now, when it comes to the mangrove snapper, that's been a completely different animal. I've seen, back in the day, my biggest mango before this year was 22.5 inches, just at about 5 pounds. Now, I've seen some in our chum that have come up that I would swear that were close to 8 pounds. There's some huge snapper inside of Tampa Bay. Now, are they a seasonal fish? Yes, to an extent. More fish come inside the bay during the summertime than they are right now, but there's still big snapper inside the bay. And one thing that we've learned this year with the snapper is that they're concentrated more on heavily bigger rock areas. Like we'll go to our typical snapper spots, and we'll catch smaller fish, but we won't catch them on whitebait, we won't catch them on pinfish, we'll catch them on shrimp. And we just realized that this year I'm not a big shrimp guy, I don't use a lot of shrimp. This is the first year that we've used a lot of shrimp. Yeah, just during the winter months. I have some friends that fish with shrimp year round and they catch their fair share of fish, but you don't get the bycatch like the grunts and everything else that you do with the shrimp. But with the whitebait and everything else, with the cut bait you'll catch a lot of grunts, which grunts are great. Grunts are one of my favorite fish to eat. I hate to clean them, so that's why we don't keep them, because he cleans all the fish.
It's interesting he says grunts, because a lot of our really good grouper spots, the guys that have families, if you pull up to a grouper spot and you start catching grunts, feed those grunts some cut bait, fired up, and then all of a sudden you'll notice the grunt bite will shut off. You know why it shut off? The grouper have moved in.
Yep. When we're using cut bait, that is a key, that don't get discouraged if you're catching grunts, because those grouper are right there with them, and it just takes them a little bit of time to push those grunts out of the way to get the grouper to feed. And a lot of times, some of our biggest gags have been caught on cut bait. I was filming, and he hates when I do this because every time I turn on the camera, he lost 3 big fish within what, a 2-minute span?
Yeah, it was 4 drops.
Yeah, I mean one right after the other, and it was all on cut bait. So again, have as much different bait on the boat as possible. We were fortunate enough to find a mass school of threadfin at one of the local bridges here at 9 feet of water, and we just loaded up because I knew I was going to chum. And so we kept a ton. We kept 2 bucketfuls of dead threadfins, cut them up, and sure enough, we got them chummed up at the end of the day and really got them going. And then we ended up leaving. But again, the bait is really key. Having the different types of bait.
So his question was basically, do the mangrove snapper shut down just like the grunts? The answer is absolutely. We'll have them chummed up to the surface, and you'll look at it. It'll be a sea of red. And we're like, what is going on? Well, like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, he actually caught a grouper that still had the mangrove that I just released in his throat.
And the mangrove is still alive. What happens is we get those mangoes up and they're fired up and we're catching them, and all of a sudden they disappear and we're like, and then all of a sudden we start catching grouper on free line. And the grouper have pushed out the mangroves. So yes, they will push each other out. The mangroves they can be really finicky. I mean, really finicky. We all know that they have the best eyesight of any fish that swims inside Tampa Bay. So the lighter that you can go, the better off you are. Now, my biggest snapper has come off of almost a hand-sized pinfish. It was this year when I caught it. He was 23 inches and 5.5 pounds. And he was a beast. And we caught every keeper that we kept was over 20 inches. And we were too shy of our limit. Because we try not to keep anything under 16 inches. And you can consistently go out, especially in the summertime. This time of year it's hard because a lot of fish have vacated the area. But you can go out and still target in snapper. But you have to target them because what's happening is that those bigger rocks are holding more heat. And I think that's what gravitates those mangroves to those rocks during this time of year, is because of them being more of a tropical fish. They have a tendency to hug those rocks, and we've caught it on film where they're just, literally hugged all around this one particular rock that was maybe this big, and there was like 30 snapper all around it with grunts. So I think with that and with their diet change, because I can't remember the last time we caught a snapper on, maybe a small snapper on whitebait, but not
even when I'm cleaning them.
We've seen them spit up small flounder, fish that we can't even recognize. There's certain tides that it will, during this time of year when you have those tides that fall out and slack out and stay slack for 3 to 4 hours, and you hit a minor or major in that time. It's usually in the minor when that's happening. That's about the only time those fish will eat. That changed my whole outlook on watching the salooners. The major and minor feeding times are about 90% accurate. We've had more, I can look at him, and we've got it on video where I can say, okay, we're coming into a major. And literally for an hour and a half to 2 hours, we just put the waylay on the fish. So the salooners, if people don't understand, the major feeding time is usually a 2-hour event. And it's when the moon is overhead and underneath the earth. And that's why the full moon is so frustrating, because the full moon, especially during the summer, those fish are going to eat all through the night. I did not have a plan for this weekend. The first time that it was so frustrating because the wind and the tide were against each other almost the entire day. We didn't have our trolling motor on the boat because it burnt up another motherboard, 5th one in a row. So I was very frustrated the fact that I already knew that it was going to be tough, because we were going to try to anchor, and with that wind and that current going completely opposite, it's so difficult to get set up on your spot where you need to be and how you need to be set up there. Because that's, especially with grouper and snapper, it's very, very important of how you set up on the spot inside of Tampa Bay. Because if the tide is running, you always want to be up tide. Because what happens is, and do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to kind of explain our techniques depending on what the tide's doing. When the tide is moving pretty good, what we do is we typically will throw ahead of the boat. So the tide's going this way. So what we do is we typically will throw up current in front of the boat. And what happens is when you're in 40 to 45 feet of water, what happens is that bait will work its way down until it gets right next to the boat. And when it's right next to the boat, it's usually on the bottom at this point. So now we're in good shape, because now we can work this bait back to the structure. Small spot, I get about 50 feet away. If it's a big spot, what I do is I typically start at the beginning of our waypoint, because what I do is when I mark a waypoint or a spot, what I do is I mark the very beginning of it and the very end of it. And what I'll do is I'll start at the very beginning, and then I'll work the boat down with that spot. So if it's a 100-yard spot, I can work that about 4 or 5 times. So if we shut down a certain area of that spot, we can move 25, 30 feet, and then we start catching them again. Now, as that tide slows down and it starts to become slack, you want to be over that spot. Because what happens is your bait's going to go straight down now. And that's what allows us to sit there and chum, because what happens is, and a lot of people don't realize, that in the middle of the shipping channel, what happens is when the tide starts to change, it could still look like it's going out on top of the surface, but it's actually coming in below. And what happens is when we realize that this is happening, we'll start chumming, and the chum looks like it's flying away from the boat. It's going away from the boat, but what happens is about 75 yards, it stops, and once it gets to a certain depth, it comes back towards us. Then that we need to start chumming, and when we start chumming, it continuously looks like that chum's going away from the boat. But then it comes back down, and when it ends up underneath the boat, and you can see the fish raise off the bottom. So it's very important that you kind of pay attention to how that tide is reacting, because we didn't even know this until this year. The way the tide would switch underneath, and it was still going a different direction on top. Now, when it comes to, we use 2 different types of jig heads. We use conventional jig head, 3/4 ounce and 1 ounce, and we'll go as light as a half an ounce when the tide's moving. And then we use the swing jig, which is it's a jig that has, the hook swings freely on the jig head itself.
So when he handed me that thing, instantly the only thing that came to mind was it looks like Stewie.
From Family Guy. It looks like his head. So he calls them Stewie jigs. But what happens is that bait fish can swim freely, and it's amazing how much you can feel that bait fish really on this jig itself. I've been using these quite a bit lately. And I'm using them from a half ounce to a 3/4 ounce, sometimes an ounce depending on the current. It's a circle hook, so it works really well. But we've gone away, I can't remember the last time I used a knocker rig.
So tell them also about what we do as far as to keep the jig head on the bottom.
Okay.
And the current's strong.
All right. When we've got it, okay, if we got a heavy current, what happens is we'll throw the bait up above the boat, like I said, up current. But when we hit the bottom, what we do is we'll let it sit for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then we'll flip the bail open, and we'll raise the rod tip, and we'll get the bait up and let it float back even more. Because at that time, if you're sitting there and you're letting your bait go and go and go and go, at one point you're at a position to where your line is at an angle like this. So if you hit it and then you're trying to pull that fish up, he's got the advantage.
How high are you popping it off the bottom and feeding it out?
However tall your rod is.
Yeah, we'll go up.
As high as you will go.
Yeah, and then we'll let it down and let it just bounce on the bottom. And it's amazing how well that works.
You do that even in the winter when you're working shrimp?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Anytime there's current.
Yep, anytime there's current, we're working it like that. Even in 17 feet of water where we found some new spots this year, we still have to do the same thing in the current. We're going a little bit lighter on our jigs because we're in 17 feet. We're typically using about a ½ ounce, but there's so many areas within, well, let me put it like this. Between the Skyway, inside the Skyway into the mouth of the Little Manatee in the shipping channel itself, we have 689 waypoints. And we've only gone south of the Skyway, watch the pole. We've only gone south of the Skyway probably 4 or 5 times. And the only reason why we went south of the Skyway this year is because we had so much rain and all the rivers were dumping that fresh water. It moved all of the snapper and grouper out to the cleaner water. So we were having to go past the Skyway to find clean water to find the fish. If I don't feel it, if I don't feel that it's right, if we're not, sometimes we'll pull up and I'll say, Chad, drop down. He'll drop down. If he doesn't get hit, we'll move.
And it may be a grunt. It doesn't matter what the hit is.
Whatever it is.
Yep. Sight of life.
Yep. Yeah, we want to make sure that this is an active spot because the spots have changed. There was a particular spot that we were fishing in the summertime that we Jurassic Gag that we consistently. I mean, we called it Jurassic Gag because we caught 11 keepers off of it at that one time, and it literally from one week to the next it shut off, and we still haven't had success there in about 6 months. Yeah.
We started as me being the anchor boy. I complained. He said, well, they have this new tool. I went, okay. And he goes, you want to know how much it is? I said, I don't care.
But yes, we use a GPS. We use a Minn Kota. There's Minn Kota Rodan. There's Motor Guide. Garmin came out with one. Power Pole's getting ready to launch theirs sometime soon. So there's a lot of different options. We haven't had the best luck with the Minn Kota. We've been through 5 motherboards right now, so it's a little bit frustrating. When it works, I love it.
How much current can it keep up with?
How much current can it keep up with?
Well,
I can do in John's Pass here and try to stick it into place.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 30. It's a
battery.
Yeah. If it's really windy and the tide's running with the wind, we'll last for about
with 5 or 6 knots.
Yeah, it will last for about 3 to 4 hours, and then the batteries will shut down. I particularly I have a Humminbird Solix 12 with the Mega HD side imaging, and we have a Simrad that we mainly use for our sonar. But that Humminbird Solix has been. I've had guys that have had Garmin, Lowrance, the Simrad side imaging, and they've gotten on my boat and they look at me and they're like, I need to buy this. And it's been to a point to where I've learned even more this year of what to look for and what to read. Some of these things you would never think that they would hold fish, but they do. And it's just it may be a little slight little hump. It may be a squiggly line indicating hard bottom. It's something different that shows up. Because a lot of Tampa Bay, the bottom on the side imaging is this flat sand. And every once in a while, the other thing that people make a mistake on in their sonar is in the middle of the channel, what happens is when those big ships are coming through with the big props, what happens is it creates a prop wash on the bottom and it creates humps like this. Well, on the sonar, on the regular sonar, I mean, you're looking at those and going, oh man, look at that relief. Look at those rocks. It's actually, it's just sand.
So the question was, can you see the hardness? Does using both help you as a tool?
Most definitely. But I'll tell you this, The Simrad compared to the Humminbird, when it comes to hardness on bottom, the Simrad is hard to read when it comes to hard bottom compared to the Humminbird on this regular sonar. The Humminbird will actually go yellow when it's soft bottom, and as soon as it gets hard, it will get really, really red. The Simrad has a different look to it, to where it will get really, really red, but it's always red. But it has these little striations in the redness itself that's really showing you that this is really hard bottom.
What pound thrust flow motor do you need to hold against the wind and the current?
It depends on your boat size. Like ours,
Say a 22 to 24 foot.
we use 112 pound thrust Minn Kota, 36 volt. But I personally would go as high as you possibly can, because then if it's a smaller boat, it allows you more time, because it's not fighting it as hard. Because we have a T-top, we have a heavy boat. Our boat is 3,500 pounds. We have a T-top. So when the wind is going and then it's going with the tide, it's fighting it. It's on 10 the whole time, and it's only going to last for like 3 hours, sometimes 2.5. Now on our YouTube channel, on every Friday, I do a Friday fishing forecast. It's become a kind of ritual thing with me, and people are now asking for it every week. Where's the Friday fishing forecast? If I don't have it up by 4 o'clock, people are going, where is it? Where is it? And what I do is I get on there and I explain the tides, I explain the salooners, and I explain the weather for the weekend. And I just try to help people, because I'm self-taught. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody teaching me what to look for, how to go out and find fish. I was all self-taught from the very beginning. I bass fished since I was a little kid, but I started fishing Tampa Bay when I was 17, and I took the bass fishing techniques and went after snook, because snook are just like bass. And then I just kind of grew myself from that point. When I ended my career, I was running about 225 trips a year. So I was on the water quite a bit. Now I can kind of give back. I've always been trying to give back when I guided to help people, because we're all here for one reason, because we like to fish. And there's no reason to not share the knowledge. And when I had local customers, I did not go to different spots. I didn't take them. I did not take them to my favorite spots or to really good spots. I wanted them to learn when they were on my boat. You can contact us through our Facebook page, through our YouTube page. We answer any questions that anybody sends us. But that's what we're all about. Is we want to share our knowledge of what we've learned over our 60 years combined of fishing inside Tampa Bay. And social media is a great place, but also people are afraid to ask questions, because in some of these forums they get bashed for asking the most simple question. And that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, we're supposed to be helping each other. And that's what we love, is when we're on the water, people come up to us and they're like, hey, Todd and Chad, what's going on? Watch your channel. We love it. Thank you very much. It allowed me to go out and catch my biggest gag or my biggest snapper from what we've learned from you guys. And that's what it's all about. And that's why we're doing the giveaways. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, it's Tampa Bay Fishing Channel on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, we're doing giveaways. We just hit 8,000 subscribers about a month ago. We did a giveaway. Customer gets to go, the subscriber gets to come and fish with us. We teach them the techniques. We give them the jig heads. We give them a head thing, face mask. We're getting ready to hit our 9,000 subscribers probably within the next week or so. So if you haven't signed up on our website, TampaBayFishingChannel.com, right on the front page, you can go on there and sign up. It costs nothing. We do a random pick through computer, and then we're going to do another giveaway at 10,000 subscribers. But our main thing is to just help people go out and catch more fish.